Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Radical Center. How's it going, Cody?
It's going great.
Is it? Okay, that's
Yeah,
good. I'm really, really glad to hear that. It's been a hmm, interesting week in politics, wouldn't you say?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. I don't think I'm not surprised. Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised, and we'll get into it during the show. But you know, the I think we should take a victory lap and saying that we were both right.
Yes, we did. We called it.
But yeah, we called it. We called it.
Yeah.
And I like being right, so I'm going to take this episode to gloat, but also
hmm
to explain to people what happened, why it happened, and if you're surprised about the outcome, why you shouldn't be surprised.
Okay, I like that. Let's go. So Trump wins. Tell us what happened, why it happened, and if you're surprised, why shouldn't you be surprised?
Well, the election in the United States, it was a stunning rebuke of the establishment, the insiders, and the elite. And it was fueled by young people, men, women, Black, Hispanic, Muslim, Arab, Jewish, working class, poor, and pretty much every demographic that the Democratic Party has dominated in for decades. And he didn't need to win them all because the parts of these demographics that he took was unified enough to put him over the top. Um, and now with Kamala Harris, it seemed like she was off to a great start because she was propped up by joy and vibes by the Democrats. They basically had a carcass as their nominee up until Kamala Harris took over. And it helped her out because the media and big tech were literally rewriting her liberal record. And nobody really held her accountable for anything. And then on the other hand, the narrative that was sold to people was that Orange Man was bad. You
hmm
can't vote for a fascist. And you had Barack Obama lecturing folks on how to vote.
Yeah, and I think people don't believe it. Like I don't think people believe the that messaging anymore. But I'll
Right,
let you go.
right. And like I was reminded then, and you know this when you were at the school board,
hmm
is when you talk down to people, especially when you tell young Black men that this is the way that they should vote,
hmm
they revolt.
Yes.
And they gave the double barrel middle finger to the establishment. They're reminded of what life was like under the Biden Harris administration, not what it was, what it is. And they're reminded every time they put gas in their car,
hmm
food in the cart, and when they sit down to pay the rent and the mortgage at the end of the month. And despite the narrative that was being fed to them about Donald Trump and his character, they essentially decided that they're too broke to be offended,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And it's an astonishing rebuke of big media, of pollsters, because they all got it wrong. And the polling firms that were quote unquote too right or too right leaning, like Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Qantas Insights, they all nailed the result. And heck, Professor Alan Lichtman, who had these magical 13 keys to the White House, who predicted every outcome since I think it was in the 1980s, except for 2000. He got it wrong. But across the board, to sum up the actual result by the numbers, is states like New York and New Jersey and Rhode Island, deep blue Democratic strongholds, were shifted to the right. And they came within less than 10 points. And I had said last week that as controversial as it seemed, that I think Joe Biden would have been a better candidate. And the numbers bore that out because the only state that she did a little better in was Washington, where she performed 0.7% better than Biden. So I think the Democratic Party, they have to really understand that it's not the voters that's the problem, it's them. And I hope that
And I
people
think
even
I think you nailed it. I don't know if Joe would have done better this time around. Regardless, I think the issue is the Democratic Party and similarly the Liberal Party have lost a lot of the groups that they normally have a huge hold on, and that are extremely loyal to them. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. There's going to be the thing is, if you're going to sit there and scare people about voting or from voting for Pierre Polyev, that's not going to work anymore. That's not going to work anymore. Donald Trump won Michigan. How are you going to convince people in Peel to vote for Trudeau? How are you going to do that? Right? So it's the narrative that's been built over the past, I would say, decade in terms of the right wing is so scary, we should all stay away from them. It's not selling anymore. People are more interested in their day-to-day lives, and the cost of groceries, the cost of gas, the things that bother them about the world, the wars that are ongoing that haven't stopped. And I think they're just more interested in listening to a clear message from my candidate. I didn't hear a clear message from her either. I didn't really get what she was about. It was more like, I'm here and I'm great and I'm not Donald Trump and I'm really friendly and I smile and laugh a lot. And oh yeah, Joe was wonderful and I worked with him and I don't regret anything Joe did. But people are mad. It's not going to work, right? So, what do you think the impact's going to be on Canada? We don't have to get into too much of the
yeah.
policy stuff. I know there might be some tariffs and the immigration stuff might have a bit of an impact if he actually does it. I don't actually believe he will, but let's see. I don't really buy it. But what do you think the impact will be on Canada?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I actually agree with Chrystia Freeland. She
Yeah, me
said
too.
the day after the election, she said, um, Canada is going to be okay. The tariffs are a negotiating tactic. He's not going to put an across the board 100% tariffs on everything that we import in the United States. Tariffs bring people to the table. What Canada has to offer is natural resources,
Mm-hmm.
softwood lumber, our oil in Alberta. Going to the United States and saying, look, if we import A, B, and C into your country, we'll sell you our oil at a discounted rate because one of President Trump's promises during the campaign was to reduce the cost of energy. And us importing into the United States would actually benefit the United States. So I think Canada is going to be okay. Um, you know, Trump is a tough negotiator, and there's no doubt going to be some tension. But I, I agree with Chrystia Freeland, unfortunately, that Canada is going to be okay. I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. And we got through 4 years of Trump in the past. We'll get through the next four or however long he stays. Let's talk about the TikTok ban. And I have an interesting opinion on this. I think I think it's going to be hard because we have to be realistic. This thing is popular. People like it.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be hard for the government to communicate any real ban to the public because it is a popular platform and people do use it. And I think because the issue is so complicated that it's going to be hard to come up with a very clear messaging on why TikTok is a bad thing. But they're not fully banning it. But, we'll see if we end up heading in that direction. But I think it's going to be really rough for the government to actually message this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. Like the reason why TikTok has been controversial in their data collection is because it is considered in like national security experts consider it a company under the influence of the Chinese Communist government, and they collect a lot of data. like every other social media tech giant, Facebook and Instagram, they control the algorithms and what you see in the same way that TikTok does. I mean, I don't know, like it's banned on government devices, but like it's kind of hard to explain to people um what the actual reasoning is. And it is popular. I have a TikTok account. I don't use it as much as I used to. Um, yeah, it's going to be really hard to message this.
Yeah, especially when because the content on it is generally light from what I've seen. I go on TikTok when I need to turn my brain off, right? And I just want to scroll through, you know, just random things that, aren't really going to be too intellectually stimulating. So it's hard to explain, why that data is so like, whatever you watch on there, why is it so important to protect? Because most of the content on there, I don't know, like, there's a lot of serious people on there, and I just don't run into them, and my algorithm is a lot of the dancing and the trends or whatever. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be an easy one for the government to explain. The government, speaking of the government, the governing party has a new ad. They're putting out a new ad, or I've already put it out. It's cool. I watched it. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's well produced. It's cool. But it is attention grabbing. But let's talk a little bit about the content. They want to talk about housing, which is not going to be something people are going to give them a whole lot of credit for. Many years into a housing crisis that does not seem to have any end anytime soon. They talk a lot about, taking credit for a lot of stuff. A lot of it that they've done, and a lot of it is good stuff. They haven't, necessarily done bad stuff, but people are kind of just mad at them overall. What do you think of the new ad specifically?
Well, let's talk about the why first.
Mm-hmm.
Over the past few weeks, there have been questions about Trudeau's leadership, got rid of the campaign chair, or whatever the title is. But essentially, the government is responding to caucus and they're responding to the public, not giving them enough credit for their 9 years in power. It is well produced. Don't really agree with a lot of the content because they're asking for credit for things that they've done, and they're trying to draw a contrast between them and Pierre Polyev. So, and I just want to say that when it comes to taking credit for things that you've done, you're rewarded for the policies that you enact, the ballot box. And that's the ultimate credit that a government will get. But what's really going on here, what they're going to try and do, they have been doing, but I think they're going to really hit it into overdrive because they haven't been attacking Pierre Polyev as much as they should have, is that the NDP and the Liberals are going to shout from the rooftop about conservatives taking away a woman's right to choose or rolling back marriage equality, cutting services, or gun control. From my perspective, they're either lying to you or they're trying to deceive you because they want you to forget about that after you graduate from college, there might not be a job for you. That when you go to the grocery store, the groceries cost more. They want you to forget that you could very well be poorer than your parents because of some of their failed policies. But it really doesn't have to be that way. And in the next election, you have the same opportunity that the Americans had, is to give the out of touch elites the double barrel middle finger and take back your future. So every time they frame those social issues like that, I really want people to understand that they're just trying to distract from some of
Yeah,
their failed policy.
yeah, I agree, and I don't believe the narrative that Pierre is going to do anything major on social issues. He doesn't sound like he would. And to be honest, you know, we've had conservative governments before. They always moderate when they're in power. Everybody governs from the center because they have to, otherwise it would be short-lived.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think, there will be a lot of attempts to fearmonger and distract. But the results in the US must give them pause to start realizing that it's not going to work. We'll see. Let's talk about Doug Ford and bike lanes.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of excitement going on that front. It's a very brave issue to take on as a premier. Very brave issue to take on because it's not easy. There are a lot of people who are very vocal about bike lanes, but there was a public poll about bike lanes, and the result of the poll were not surprising to me, but I think surprising to some people in the sense that there was perhaps an idea that more people support the bike lanes or support or
Removing
use
them.
bike lanes than we originally thought. So what do you think about that? Do you think Ford is taking on an issue that's going to get him some votes? Is this a position that's going to help him, or is this a position that's going to cost him something?
Well, it's gonna cost him a small minority, and I don't mean to denigrate anybody, but it's gonna cost him a small group of people in places like downtown Toronto who care about active transportation. But,
But do
you
they
know,
vote conservative?
no, they
Usually,
don't. So
that's what
it's
I think.
not, yeah, they don't usually vote conservative. So I guess, yeah, you're right. In one sense, no, it's not going to cost them in the votes. But I mean, I don't mean to toot our own horn again, but we made this prediction last week in our first episode that it was going to be popular.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing too, the $200 rebate checks had heavy support too, which makes sense. But anyways, I digress. I have been of the opinion that active transportation is not something that is inaccessible to people anywhere. I think more people are concerned about their commute to work, and if it means, you know, people spending more time with their families and easing congestion, then, I put out something on Facebook. I already told Crab Meat Sicaria on Twitter. I said, I will lend my pickup truck to remove the bike lanes free of charge if they want to. But yeah, it is popular. I believe if I take this poll correctly, approximately 70% of Ontarians believe that removing it was either a good or a very good idea. So I'm going to go with the people on this one. I'm going to stick with the 70%. So we'll have to see how this is going to happen because the bill essentially allows the provincial government to override municipalities and say, um, you know, the government doesn't like this bike lane, then it's going. So it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to go. Personally, I think the only type of resistance you're going to get is from Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow. But her statement that she put out was just to save face with her progressive base.
Right.
If she was really going to put up a fight about it, it would be on the cover of every newspaper in the city.
Yeah. I think you're right, but I also think that um, I actually had this question during the mayoral race, and I interviewed all the mayoral candidates, and Deepika Demirla had actually taken up this fight. I think I'm going to give her a little bit of credit. I think Deepika started all this, but maybe she doesn't want the credit, but she did bring this issue up. And one of the questions I asked her was, why do you have to remove a lane of cars to put in bike lanes? Can't they, widen the sidewalks a little bit and put in protected bike lanes? Can't we just have it all? Like, why do we have to pick between the car lanes and the bike lanes? Is there no way to actually figure out a way to improve our sidewalks, or, create new ways of creating sidewalks where you could have a protected bike lane and, room for people to walk? And she said there are ways of doing that. It's just more expensive for municipalities, and that's why they've opted for, doing it the way they're doing. But it just makes no sense, right? um at least this is what I remember. I wonder if in the future, if there is a way for us to not have to choose between bike lanes and cars. There should be a way where we could have both. Many streets have enough room. I don't know. I'm not an urban planner. I'm not a transportation expert. But there's got to be a way where you don't have to choose, and it doesn't have to turn into this group of people against this group of people. And if it's money, if it's expensive, then maybe we have to do it in a small in a slower pace, because I don't think cars are going to go away anytime soon.
No.
So that's my
Yeah,
perspective.
I agree with that. The answer is yes, there is a way to do it. I mean, it's 2024, right?
Yeah.
If Elon Musk is able to come up with robots that can walk, talk, and sound like a regular human being, I would think that we would be able to do it. Everything's about money. Money makes the world go round. But the last thing is that I would say is this is something that in Brampton from the pandemic, the sprawl of bike lanes across the city was something that has really made a lot of people angry. And what they did was in 2020, they had temporary bike lanes during COVID for people to use them. And then I guess they took a poll and they decided that they were going to make them more permanent. And then they just took that as a trial run and they just blew it up across the city. And it makes people angry because, where I used to live in Brampton, instead of having 4 lanes of traffic, 2-way each way in front of a very busy school, the high school that I went to, is now down to 2. And it causes congestion because people stop in the middle of the road and let their kids out to go to school instead of going through the kiss and ride that's full, and it's complete gridlock. So you can have it both ways. It's just, do political leaders have the courage, and do they have the, you know, do they have the financial tenacity to stand up and say, look, if we're going to do the bike lanes, then we have to do it smart. It's like when we talk about the issue of the environment, right? The economy and the environment have to work hand in hand, right? So, we'll see what happens. My gut feeling is this poll is going to give the premier the justification that he needs to not do what he wants, but to exercise the government's power to take away the bike lanes where it's not useful. And I do give Deepika credit. She latched onto an issue that was very popular. She came, fairly close to becoming mayor. And I was really impressed as somebody who just moved to the city during the mayoral campaign. I was really impressed by her and her willingness to stand up, especially against her colleagues, because, she got a lot of criticism from her colleagues for just doing the right thing, for latching on to an issue that she saw was important to people. And I don't think she gets enough credit for that.
Yeah, and I also, I've said it in the past. I think it was entirely inappropriate for her council colleagues to, be putting out, emotionally charged statements and speeches about her election platform. I think that's entirely inappropriate, but that's, maybe we'll talk about that another
Yeah,
time.
it's a
We have
yeah,
some questions from our listeners. It's our second episode. I'm so excited. That means
yeah,
somebody is actually listening to us. Thank
yeah.
you.
One person.
At least one. At least one. that we know of. So tell me what you think of the following. So auto insurance rates have gone up significantly. Why is no one talking about it? Why are the opposition parties not picking up on this issue?
It's not a winnable issue for anybody. The problem is with auto insurance, they've been historically high, and I came from Brampton, and auto insurance is absolutely out of control. Like the first year when it was 16 and I got my first vehicle, I was paying $438 a month for insurance. $38 a month for insurance. It was crazy. But I think where we are right now is the reason why it's gotten substantially more higher is the cost of material and the amount of auto thefts. Auto thefts, I know the government has been saying that it's coming down, and maybe it is, but auto thefts are through the roof, right? With technology, it's getting easier and easier to steal vehicles, and somebody has to pay to replace that vehicle. And I think it's one of the reasons why my insurance company, they required me to get a tracker put in my pickup, because I think it was either last year or the year before, it was like the second most stolen pickup truck in the entire country. So auto thefts and auto parts also has to do with your postal code. And like I don't have a magical answer to that. But that's sort of the two main factors. It's the auto thefts, and it's the cost of auto body parts to replace things when you get into an accident.
Yeah, I also think that even if the auto theft issue was to be fully resolved, which I don't think it will be, I think it's going to be hard for insurance rates to come down significantly anyway. But I agree with you. I drive an Accord, and it's on the list of
Hmm.
things that are extremely popular, I guess, among the auto theft crowd. And I called my insurance company because I was like, why is my insurance rate going up? Like, it just keeps going up and up and up. And they're like, it's because of the type of car you drive. And I'm like, okay, tell me, what car should I
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
that doesn't get stolen? Because this is getting ridiculous. Every year it goes up, and and it's something that you can control. So I do recognize the frustration of, and I do share that also. I think the reason why, so to answer the question, the reason why no one's talking about it and why opposition parties aren't running away with it is because it's a really, really tough issue to solve, because there's multiple factors involved that different levels of government have to address. Our second question is electoral reform. Most people agree that the first past the post voting system does not encourage voting. What is an alternative? Why is an alternative system not being discussed? And we all remember a couple of weeks ago, our prime minister went on a podcast and said he regrets not doing something about electoral reform, which I don't understand why he would do that, since he's still the prime minister and he can actually do something about it tomorrow. I don't understand him these days, but that's what he did. What do you think about that, Coach?
Well, it's easy to campaign on changing the electoral system and then winning in the current electoral system.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that as a knock to the current federal government. If you run and you win and you've won a number of elections, then why would you change it? Right? Why would you change it? The only thing that I would say that I would like to see is we have the Senate, and it's not talked about that much because it's more like a rubber stamp for the House of Commons rather than a check. My personal opinion is that I think that the Senate should be reformed so that it's elected, so that people have a choice to have a check between the House of Commons and the Senate instead of a rubber stamp. Because as of right now, that's what the Senate does. They just rubber stamp whatever passes in the House of Commons, no matter what the government is. And speaking of the United States, they have a similar system. They have two senators per state, and they're both of those senators are elected by the people. You could talk about whether it's independent or, along party lines. It doesn't really matter. Like that's, you know, small ball. But the only thing that I would say about our electoral system is that there's not really an easy answer because there's never been consensus. And if Pierre Poilievre wins the next election, I mean, why is he going to want to change the system? He won with it, so why would he
Yeah.
want to change it,
I
right?
don't see conservatives wanting to take this issue on. I think if anybody would benefit from, potentially preferential ballot system, it would be the liberals. So I think if any political party was going to do it, it would have been Trudeau, at least in the near future. And he didn't do it, and he goes around saying that he regrets it, and I don't think he has enough time to do any. Do Yeah, it's weird. It's something he campaigned on and he felt very strongly about, and then just put it on the back burner and just didn't address it.
And I think, and another controversial topic that hasn't been discussed is, separating from the monarchy and doing away with the monarchy. I think if we ever get to a point, and I'm not pro or con, because the monarchy is kind of in the background, it's not something that we really think about on a day-to-day basis, but I think that if there's a day where we decide the future of whether we stick with the monarchy or not, that might be the appropriate time to have that conversation. Again, talking a lot about the US today. That's what happened with them, right? They separated from the British and they decided their own system. So, yeah, it's not an easy question to be answered, but I thank the listener for the question nonetheless.
Yeah, thank you. And keep sending us questions, keep sending us comments, we love it. And tune back or wait for the next episode, whichever I guess makes more sense. But thank you so much for joining us today. Cody, thank you for your very insightful comments, and I look forward to seeing what next week has in store
Yeah.
for politics
Yeah.
in Canada and maybe around the world.
Well, thank you. It's been a great show, and the one thing that I really want to recognize next week is Remembrance Day. And it's really important to recognize the people who laid down their lives to protect our democracy, to give us freedom of speech and freedom of expression, to be able to come on a podcast like this and not have to worry about bombs flying outside of our window or army tanks going down the street. So take a few minutes on November 11th to be very thankful to those folks who laid down their lives for our country.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for that, Cody. And with that, we will get back to you next week with a new episode and fresh takes on everything that's going on in the political world. And have a great week, everybody.